Welcome to MK Crypto Diaries. I am your host, Dr. Justine Scerri Herrera, and we are pre-recording today's episode on the 21st of February 2023. This episode marks the very first episode of the mini-series we are launching on MICA, the DLT pilot regime, and CARF. On today's mini-series episode, we will be discussing MICA. What is the current state of MICA? How will passporting work? How is the MFSA, Malta's regulator, getting MICA ready? Should one expect smooth sailing into MICA or a scary mess? Will we see regulatory arbitrage even though MICA will endorse harmonisation throughout Europe? To discuss all this today, we are thrilled to have here with us live in the studio Camille Pepos. Camille Pepos is the Deputy Head of the Malta Financial Services Authority's Fintech Supervision team, which division includes cryptocurrencies and virtual financial assets. So Camille, so lovely to have you join us here today, live in the studio/offices of MK Fintech. And I'm really excited to get into this conversation, the topic very dear to my heart, MICA and regulation. So just to begin, a sort of personal question. Can you tell me a bit about your background? Were you always working for regulators? What were you doing maybe before the MFSA?
Yes, of course. Hi, and thanks for having me. So I'm Camille, as you can pick up. I'm French, and before reaching the Malta's shore, I spent some time in Dubai. I was in the private sector, trying to help some fintech startup meet with venture capitalists. So I was kind of the middleman. That's where I learned a lot about fintech, obviously, trying to understand the business model, what's a good investment, what's not a good investment. It's also where I picked up, let's say, a passion for crypto. I was the hype of blockchain, let's say, the entire world. Everyone wanted to solve every problem with blockchain. You can do everything on it. So it was a bit of the hype. And really, it's the passion of the entrepreneurs that kind of triggered my curiosity. And then I guess I went down in the rabbit hole, learning as much as possible, like all of us, I guess, in the industry. And then I saw what Malta was doing in the space. Some wise people in Dubai told me to really look at it, that this could be, an interesting place for me. Decided to relocate here, thinking what's the worst that can happen, a holiday. And then I started to speak to people around. I had the opportunity to meet the MFSA a couple times. I really like their vision. I never actually saw myself becoming a regulator, but really like the vision, what they wanted to do in the space. And I thought, if this industry is ever going to go somewhere, we need some good guys. A regulator is not necessarily a bad person, just someone trying to set some basic rules. And I thought it was really much needed in the space.
Yes.
So I thought, okay, maybe, with my private sector background, I can help out, make sure that, we speak the same language. And I think it was beneficial. So
No, I have no doubt. For the MFSA, it's nice as well that they have someone on board who has a background in the private sector, because you can really understand market participants. And I think it's just better for both sides, especially when applying for licensing, since applying for a license is like a marriage. It's like a 1 or 2 year process. So it's nice to understand both sides. And thanks for that. In terms of what's happening in Europe, so everyone knows there's a lot of fragmentation, and that MICA will change this due to harmonization. Can you give a bit of an overview of the current landscape of what's going on in Europe, so registration versus licensing?
Yes, of course. So let's call them VASP, just for the sake of this conversation, because every member state has a different term. Right now, across Europe, at a very bare minimum, every VASP needs to follow some AML D5 registration, or let's say rules, on AML, KYC, onboarding, etc. That's the base layer. That's AML D5. This has been a couple years. So every member state can register VASP on that. On top of this layer, some member states, such as Malta, France, even Liechtenstein, have developed a regime that, establish prudential and conduct requirements. Malta was the first one to develop such regime of saying, okay, it's fine, AML is obviously important, but there's so much more to it. And if we really want to protect consumer, we need to set some other rules. I think it was the right choice. We're seeing, with what's happening around the world, that just KYC onboarding is not enough. You need to look at, governance and things like that. So right now, this is the situation we're in. Unfortunately, it's not working very well because of this fragmentation, and we have a lot of operators that obviously service the entire of Europe that need to have multiple licenses or multiple registration. Obviously, this is super cumbersome. I think all of us can appreciate that. And I think this is where MICA would really help, because MICA introduced the single licensing across Europe. So on top of bringing new requirements, one license, and you'll be able to service the entire European market, which I think is great. So this is the next step, and hopefully will alleviate this fragmentation.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that. So MICA seems to be finally on the doorstep of the EU. So it's been postponed twice, first October, then February, and now hopefully it's been rumoured to take place in April in terms of the vote from the European Parliament. How is the MFSA getting ready for MICA? And from your gap analysis, how much alignment will be needed to be sort of fully aligned with MICA? And lastly, what does this mean for current licensed VASPs in Malta?
All right, quite a few questions. So yes, we're hoping it's going to be voted and implemented in spring. From the last that we heard, this is the plan. Obviously, there's always something that can delay, but I think right now with what happened in the market, etc., there's no reason to delay anymore. I think it's quite important for Europe to go through it. From what we understood, the previous delays were due to more technical things, translation, things like that. But there's been a political agreement. So the entire Europe want this text. They're not gonna change the principle. So I think it's gonna go through this spring, and then we can start on. What we've been doing since essentially September 2020, when it was first announced, is obviously looking at how it's gonna affect our landscape, and looking at how we compare to it. VFA Act is super stringent. It's quite a big framework, touches a lot of points. And what we saw and what we're pleased to see is that we're extremely aligned with MICA. Reason which is because we share the same roots, which is essentially MiFID. So we took the high principle of MiFID. We took the principle of prospectus when it comes to white paper. So we find ourselves extremely close. Now, every time we received a new draft, we actually carried out a gap analysis almost line by line. It's 400 pages text.
Wow. Oh, wow.
So it's
longer than MICA.
It's quite a lot of work. And we saw that we're very, very much aligned. We actually think that we're the closest to MICA compared to what exists out there, or the member state, and even abroad. So for us, it's fantastic. That means that there's little alignment that is needed, and that means also that our existing license holder are already at, let's say, MICA level, which is good, because
so they'll be like grandfathered in to some extent.
Yes, I think that essentially anyone that's been licensed under the VFA Act has been essentially following MICA requirements since then. So that's pretty good from a business perspective, because your process, your policies, everything you're doing, your operating model is already at that standard, which I think is pretty good. That gives you quite a competitive edge compared to other business that maybe were just, AMLD5 registered and only thought of AML. These guys, I think, is going to be a bit of a wake-up call for them. Prudential and conduct requirements are not that easy to put in place. Plus, the scope has grew as well. For AMLD5, we're talking only about custody and exchange. MICA and even what exists under VFAs, a whole lot of other services, portfolio management, dealing on an account, execution, all of those that were never really treated. So Right now, we know what we need to change. We know the few differences, and essentially we have two choices. Either we wait for MICA to be implemented, so that means let's say it's voted this spring, plus there's a transitory period before some provision are applicable to CASP. That's the easy solution, but it's not necessarily what we want to do. What we want to do is take advantage of the fact that we have a homegrown regime. Therefore, we have a freedom. We can change things. Obviously, it's Parliament approving that, but we can recommend as the MFSA, and we want to align as much as possible to MICA standards. That means, like that, we would grandfather or existing license holder before the provision are applicable. They're already subject to those. In many cases, it's even reducing requirements.
Yes.
As a VF agent.
The share capital mainly, which I have.
Yes, you're very familiar to the requirements. So yes, share capital, for example, classification of clients. There's many things that we require currently that are not foreseen within MICA. So for us, we say that's very positive.
Yes. The only risk is if there are any changes to the regulation on voting stage, because you would have made those changes, but hopefully not. So it doesn't seem like it, but
exactly. So this is why right now we're preparing as much as possible. We know from the final draft where the regulation is going. We're not forcing major changes.
No.
I don't think it's going to be the case. But yes, we're obviously waiting for the final draft before, pulling the trigger.
And it's like there are two final drafts. There's the one, like if you type in MICA regulation, the 168-page draft from the EU website. And then there's like an unofficial one, which is like a letter to the Commission, dated October, which is actually much longer. And there are some more technical, behind the scenes, everyone knows what's official and not. I'm guessing it's the latter one, the longer one, to the Commission, because that's dated October.
Yes, I wish it was the 160 pages, but no, it's not. Yes, obviously it's very much awaited for, so there's even a lot of leaks and things like that.
Yes.
Being a member state, being a regulator, we receive obviously the official draft. Sometimes we know it's public, sometimes it's not, but yes, much longer than 160.
Just figuring things out. And in terms of timeframes and timelines, can you give an overview of the transitionary periods that MICA mentions, like for the national competent authorities and for CASPs to get regulated, and also how passporting will work? Is it immediate or not?
Yes, definitely. So with MICA, obviously, there is two major players that are impacted. The first one, the VASP, that will be called CASP after MICA is in place. So for them, the timeline is quite straightforward. So let's assume that MICA gets voted this spring. 18 months later, the provision for CASP become applicable. So let's say end of next year. From that time on, you can be licensed as a CASP and you can start passporting from the day you're licensed as a CASP. So it will take the time it takes for every NCA, etc. But you can start passporting similar to traditional financial services. It's a notification to all the member states and you can go. So there's the first 18 months of transitory periods. Additional to those 18 months, there's another 18 months. Why? Is because one has to be mindful that everyone that right now operates as a VASP or as a CASP in the future needs to be authorized. That's obviously a massive pressure on every regulator across Europe, and you cannot expect a regulator to license everyone on the first week. I wish it was the case, but it's not possible. So after those 18 months, everyone needs to be licensed. If after that you're still operating as a CASP without a license, then it's unauthorized business, and then obviously it's enforcement and things like that. So that's the timeline for CASP.
What about for issuers? There was like if you're an e-money, an EMT or an ART, you have like 2 months within which to submit, or there are some soft sort of expectations.
They're not that soft, actually.
Hard expectations.
Yes. So for issuer, it's a bit more complex, let's say, because let's call them stable coin, but under MICA there's two types as we know. Yes, EMT, so electronic money token, and ART, asset reference token. And there's a different treatment for each of them. So for EMT, actually, there is no transitory periods, meaning the moment the provision are applicable, so that's 12 months from the moment MICA is voted in. If you want to continue being an issuer of EMT, you need to be licensed as an EMI, electronic money institution. My belief why there was no further transition is because today you can already be licensed as an EMI. This is already something that can be processed.
But within 12 months, you have to submit or obtain and be authorized.
Both.
You have to, okay, because and then it's like it's pressure on the regulators really, because if you submit on the day, so you know the.
So exactly. So after the 12 months, when the EMT provision are applicable, if you want to continue being an issuer, you need to be licensed as an EMI. So there's actually no transitory period. The moment the provision are applicable, you need to be it. It's a bit more different for arts. Reason why? Because it's a different beast, as we know. It's a bit more complex, and here it depends on who's issuing the arts. So let's say it's a credit institution, for example. They have, I believe it's 1 or 2 months to submit an application, but first they need to notify the regulator. If you're someone else than a credit institution, again, I think you have 1 month to notify the regulator and start the application process. So for art, there is a bit more time because we know it's a bit more difficult.
Yes.
But EMT, yes. It's right on. So
because it's within the euro, so the
correct.
risks they're trying to protect.
Correct, and we know obviously based on right now how long it takes to authorize an EMI. My advice to anyone issuing an EMT is start today.
Definitely. That 1 year mark, I mean, it's very tight.
Yes, let's not forget as well the bottleneck, because
yes, of course.
I mean, you're not going to be the only one. That's a given.
Yeah. And there's the regular ones as well, because it's EMI and EMT will be the same body.
Exactly. So there's a learning curve from the regulator. That's obviously expected. I mean, processing an issue of EMT is going to take a bit more time than processing a plain vanilla EMI. That's for sure. But there's going to be a bottleneck. There's a lot of issuers out there. And if everyone starts speaking to the regulator, very easily you could find yourself, part of a very big pile and run the risk of, if I'm not authorized by then, I need to stop, essentially. And for a business, I think it's quite a problem to have to stop. I mean,
of course.
Your competitor will take advantage, and then
you can't even be listed and traded on exchanges. It's the ripple effect of
nothing.
Market disruption, availability.
Exactly. So no, for EMT, it's quite important to start early. Speak to legal advisor, understand what it will take to be an EMI. And really start looking at the existing guidelines and things like that, and say, okay, right now I'm not a crypto asset service provider. I'm an electronic money institution, so quite important to look at it. It's a bit of a change. There's guideline from the EBA, etc. But yes, it takes time to compile an application, and it will take time from the regulator to authorize you.
Yeah, so don't underestimate the process.
Definitely.
So we've had to move to the next question, which is focused on RTSs. So first, I'd just like to give a definition of an RTS for the benefit of the listener, and then ask the relevant question. So by definition, a regulatory technical standard is a delegated act, technical, prepared by a European supervisory authority. It should further develop, specify and determine the conditions for consistent harmonization of the rules included in the basic legislative act. So many readers have said that certain provisions of MICA are a bit ambiguous and they require certain specifications or elaborations or clarifications, and these should derive from these RTSs. So are you involved with any working groups at EU level, so EBA or ESMA? And if yes, were these RTSs discussed? And if you could give some insight of any thoughts of how these will be rolled out, because obviously if MICA comes first and the RTSs come after, which might be the case, there's going to be a bit of disruption.
Yes, definitely. So, I mean, in short, what an RTS is a way to harmonize approach to authorization and supervision. Right now, with a European text, obviously you have multiple regulators, multiple member states. The last thing we want to see is one regulator not acting like the other regulator. I mean, this will defeat the purpose, right? Yes. So this is what the RTSs are about. Yes, obviously we're quite involved in all the working group. Obviously, we benefit from a lot of experience, maybe expertise that we've learned, over the last few years. That expertise is really, really interesting for all the ESAs, European Supervisory Authorities. EBA and ESMA are involved in those working groups. I think there is a schedule for 54 RTSs right now. The list might evolve, so might grow or not. Right now, the objective for all those working groups, those drafting group, etc., is to have all the RTSs available by the time the provision comes in. So this is also why there's a 12 months or an 18 months provision, because we need that time to draft those. So essentially, everything related to an issuer should become available the day the provision are applicable. Now you'll realize that this is quite short. Yes. So 12 months for that many RTSs and 18 months for that is quite short. So everyone's really busy. This takes quite a significant amount of time from us, definitely. There is an expected level of contribution from all member states. And I wouldn't like to say that there's maybe a high expectation from us due to the fact that we have expertise and we need to share our supervisory knowledge. So we're definitely very involved in those. It's very exciting because we can share the lesson that we've learned, okay? I mean, from a regulatory perspective, there's one thing on paper, and then when you see the practical, I mean, every rules looks good on paper, and then you realize, but this is not something that can be applied within the sector. So this is where we're there to kind of bridge the gap as much as possible, help.
Amazing. Okay, yes. That was great insight, and it's sort of a bit of an unknown, but the expectation is there from both sides. If I had to move on to the digital finance package. So the digital finance is a top priority for the EU. In fact, the European Commission adopted a digital finance package on the 24th of September 2020. This strategy includes legislative proposals of crypto assets, digital operational resilience, so DORA, but also includes strategies across other related sectors, such as banking, investment, and insurance. What is the MFSA's FinTech Supervision team involvement on the digital finance package across the relevant sectors?
All right, so obviously we're very involved. When the DFP came, it was music to our ears. We've been pushing the FinTech agenda for quite some time. But within the MFSA, we act as a coordinator. This is a role that came up naturally because of our knowledge. Let's say we built, center of knowledge or center of excellence for things related to crypto, but also innovation. The fintech team doesn't only do crypto. We also have a sandbox. We also look at how innovative technology impact the rest. So for example, what's the impact of AI on certain sector? What's the impact of machine learning? What's the impact of DLT, etc., etc. So we've built that knowledge. We're sharing that knowledge as much as possible. There's even insights that we publish, so internally and externally. So naturally, we were the perfect candidate. Let's put it this way. Very exciting for us, obviously, because now, let's say, our word comes disrupting the traditional word. That's really good. So yes, right now we act as coordinator. We transfer knowledge as much as possible. Point of reference. So everything crypto related generally ends up on my desk, even though it's not a VASP. But we're pleased to have that role. I think it's important. The thing is, we cannot be, one team that is pro-innovation and the rest of the regulatory authority that doesn't necessarily understand, maybe sometimes is afraid because of this.
It's intimidating space.
Yes, I mean, you're afraid of what you don't know. So here we're there to break barrier as much as possible. And share our knowledge. Yes. So that's our role.
Oh, it's amazing. Because I mean, everyone is really trying to explore and see how they can leverage blockchain technology. It could be investment services sector, even the healthcare sector, insurance, fintech, dipping their toes in crypto getting EMI. So it's all this interlinking between all these disciplines. which brings me to my next question of cross-disciplinary sectors. So the market is evolving in such a way where service providers and large groups are seeking various licenses in cross-disciplinary sectors to cut costs, be more competitive, and also move towards this super app culture. So we saw that Binance has a crypto exchange license, but also an EMI, and Revolut, who, for example, had an EMI, also moved into crypto. So what would the MFSA's approach be if there was a provider who was seeking, let's say, a VASP license together with an EMI license or a broker-dealer in the traditional securities sector license? Would there be any internal communication or collaboration between the various sectors to deal with this multi-license applicant?
Absolutely. One, we realized that being the single regulator, it's a strength, right? So a group that comes and want to set up shop here in Malta and have multiple licenses is speaking to one authority. This is not the case everywhere in the world, and we think it's quite a strength. So we want to leverage that as much as possible, have a streamlined approach. So that approach is in authorization and in supervision. So what have we done so far? On top, obviously, communicating between teams, sharing, supervisory intelligence, etc. We want to create for authorization a standardized approach and streamlined approach, which we have done the last 2 years. We've been extremely busy streamlining our approaches. For example, templates, procedures, timelines. Right now we have a public commitment, even in terms of timeline, how long it's going to take to process an application. So right now, regardless of the sector, the process is the same. So that was the foundation. Okay. On top of that, what can we do to build is, and we're exploring the idea, is having the concept of a lead team. So let's say you want a VASP license and an EMI license, or let's say a VASP and a MiFID license. We could see synergy of saying, okay, let's introduce a single point of contact. Because for the business, it does make sense. And for us internally, it does make sense as well.
Duplicating the process.
Yes, I mean, there's already things that we don't duplicate anymore. For example, all of our efforts in terms of fitness and properness, due diligence, this is now a centralized team. So regardless of where you're coming from, the individuals are assessed by the same team. This is already something that has proved to be very efficient. But now looking at all application, yes, they need to be assessed within their own merits, obviously, but there's things that we can put in common and we can consider as part of a group. For example, our expectation in terms of governance, our expectation in terms of time commitment. We need to see it holistically because we know that right now, it doesn't exist, a company just doing one thing. Company want to do multiple services. So you might have someone that, one morning providing investment services, in the afternoon they're providing an EMI. So we need to understand that. We need to see if the knowledge is there and if resource sharing can be there. So the group concept, we get it pretty much. And I think we're improving pretty well on that. When it comes to supervision, we also want to, as much as possible, have synergy. And we're exploring ways of saying, okay, if you have multiple licenses, can we, for example, group on-site visits? If I'm coming to your office to see how you're doing, can both teams come at the same time? If you're sharing data with me, can both teams use that data? So we're trying as much as possible to understand this thing. In certain legislation, there's still a need for segregation, having different entities. But we're seeing that less and less. MICA does not impose segregation, for example. So this is a direction that we're slowly taking of saying, do we need multiple entities? Maybe now it's possible to be, and with MICA it will be, a credit institution, but also dealing with crypto. In the past, you needed 2 entities and you need to assess them within their own merit. But less and less we're seeing that. So yes, the super app culture, we're conscious of that. This is how financial services are evolving. Yes, I mean, platformization and building on top. So this is what we're trying to instill in our authorization and supervisory practices. Obviously, there is certain limitation because we insert to certain ESAs and we need to, no matter what, see compliance with the relevant legislation. But if there is synergy, if we can work better together and provide a better service to the market, we'll always do it.
Of course. No, it's definitely, benefits of, both interest and both parties, cutting costs and sharing resources. It's definitely an ideal way to approach it because, I mean, there's no other way really. It's just gonna increase the need for more licenses and cutting costs and, doing away with partners. So that's really amazing and great news to hear, especially for us as service providers of the industry. So very helpful to be able to share with our clients that there is this approach taken internally from the MFSA. Just as a couple of concluding questions, obviously we've discussed a lot what Malta has to offer, but if you could sort of summarize why you think and genuinely believe that Malta has a jurisdictional competitive edge over other jurisdictions when it comes to MICA crypto licensing, maybe some of the strong points.
All right. I mean, I wouldn't say we have a competitive edge because obviously we're all member state and we'll follow the same regulation, so there's not really an edge. What differentiates from other member state and maybe other NCA is obviously our experience. Let's not forget we've started this journey in 2018 and we've learned for those past few years. I mentioned it before, but when you look at the VFA Act and how close it is from MICA, then one can realize that essentially we've been doing what MICA will require for the last 4 years. So that means we're familiar authorizing, VASP to the level that MICA will require. We're familiar supervising VASP, etc. So that's on that. More on the practical term, for new applicants, we know exactly what is expected, and new applicants can today apply for a VFA license that would be transformed into a CASP license. And that's through the simplified authorization process. And potentially that's one of the competitive edge that we have. So MICA foresee that if you have a similar or equivalent regime currently, you can benefit from the simplified authorization process, which means in practice that, and we can benefit from it. Right now, my existing population of VASP or VFA service provider, as we call them locally, when MICA comes in and when we have the provision of a CASP, instead of reauthorizing them, which is disruptive to the market, I can just look at the gap that there is, and I'm allowed to say, okay, for a typical authorization of a CASP, I'm requiring, A to Z documents, but I already have most of those documents in file. I can look with my existing license holder and say, listen, to reauthorize you, as a CASP, I just need, an updated business plan, this document, and that's it. I don't need to go through
the whole process.
The entire process.
Like an update, kind of.
Exactly, just making sure that I've refreshed documentation. Exactly. And with that pack, I can then license someone within the first week of MICA. And I think this is really the competitive edge, because let's not forget that after the 18 months, this is when regulator will start receiving the first pack of application, not when they will assess, and don't forget the bottleneck. So right now, this is our competitive edge, the knowledge and expertise that we have. So we can have more complex business model. We know how to treat them. We can benefit from the simplified authorization process. So existing license holder can become CASP really fast. We can accommodate right now someone that is even thinking of becoming a CAS. Why wait? Right now, become a VFA service provider, and then automatically you will become a CAS. That's pretty powerful. So I think those are really the competitive edge, and that smooth transition. Just the fact that we're gonna align things. I think we have a pretty good approach with the market. I mean, it's an open door policy. We're always, very easy to reach, etc. We want to do more outreach, speak more to the market, people that are interested, existing license holder. We want this to be a very smooth transition. I mean, the hard part has been done. This is what, we need to now capitalize on what we have and grow the sector. So this is what we want to do. This is the objective. So I think those are the reason. If I was a business and I would be looking at getting a CAS license, yes, I could think of Malta and the MFSA with the experience and, with the things that they've learned and the current scenario, this could be a place that, I think of.
No, for sure. I have no doubt, and I can second for that by a mile, because essentially the journey that the MFSA and Malta went through for the last 4 years all the other member states are going to start going through it now. And obviously it takes a couple of years for everyone to get acquainted with a new regulation. So from lawyers to accountants to regulators to, market operators. And it's definitely not an easy journey. So I do agree. And I think we're going to see like regulatory arbitrage within the union, even though we have harmonization. Because if a regulator in Poland or somewhere else, is still getting acquainted vis-a-vis Malta, who has had the law for 4 years, it's just, it's logical. So let's see how things will roll out. And as a final question, how do you project the landscape to unfold? What are your thoughts? And what are you most excited about for the future of crypto?
All right. So what I'm seeing in the market has been already a couple of years, but I think it's gonna speed up. Before the crypto market, I think was primarily driven by retail investor. I think we can all agree on that. I think this is going to change. Right now, institutional investors are not going to come in before a harmonized regulation. This is just too dangerous. The investment appetite is not there. And I think it's a good thing. The moment institutional investors come in, for two main reasons. The first one is that, let's not forget, the crypto market is essentially funding startup. And that takes me back to my previous job. You need smart money. Right? If you're an entrepreneur in the crypto space in Web3, you need smart money, you need access to markets, etc. This is what smart investor or institutional investor can bring on. The second one is, right now, the market is super volatile because retail investors are retail. They're not professional investor. So just by seeing the tweet of someone, they go crazy. This is really, really bad. You're not going to build on that. If the market keeps being that volatile, you're not going to be able to build the crypto industry. So having professional investor, having more depth in the markets and needed more liquidity to move the markets is going to be good. Because if the crypto assets are more stable, then people are going to start adopting them. Right now, I can appreciate that someone doesn't want to invest in an altcoin saying, listen, tomorrow it might be worth nothing, and this is right now almost a pump and dump, etc. With more money in it, you reduce that. Look at the stock market. It's the exact same. Right now, we're penny stocks. Right now, crypto is penny stock. If you look at it, people think that the crypto market is big. It's actually super tiny. It's less than 2 trillion. Right now, this is less than one stock on the New York Stock Exchange. So Apple is 9 trillion.
Wow.
So
for context, that's amazing.
Crypto is nothing. It's a drop in the ocean. People
when
need to realize that.
Hey,
people realize that. So right now, just a tweet from Elon Musk and the world goes crazy. This shouldn't be the case. So yes, we need more money in it. It's going to be more stable, etc. What I'm also seeing, and that ties in with my first point, is tokenization. I think this is a big trend. I remember 2017, 2018, that was the big thing. STO, we're going to tokenize everything, but actually nothing really happened because there was no regulatory framework, etc., etc. But I think now this is going to happen more with those harmonized framework. Again, this is good. Why? For two reasons again. Because if you have physical asset back in crypto, those crypto become more stable. There is more crypto adoption. People feel safer if that crypto is linked to gold, real estate, whatever. It's something tangible. Sure. That's a good thing for us. The second thing is that the asset management and even physical asset sector is ripe for disruption. This is not an efficient market. Really not. So having something tokenized and
can leverage technology, automation.
Yes, obviously, you're a lawyer, so you know what it takes to just transfer an asset to someone else. Sure. This could be just a crypto asset, and just with a smart contract. Sorry to say, but a lot of work from lawyers could be removed, and this means that this unlocks some new business model, and obviously this changed the way the economy works, right? So this is, I think, pretty exciting for me. And there's a lot of assets that we could create actually a market.
True.
A lot of illiquid
liquid
assets
exactly.
could have a market, and very easily you can move them around. So that's new business model, new startup, new company could be created. So that unlocks a lot of value. Apart from that, MICA 2.0. I mean, MICA is...
Let's see how 1.0 is going to go.
Yes, but there's already talks for MICA 2.0, and that's really something that really excites me. Why? Because right now the services proposed by MICA is the services we have for VFA for the last 4 years, but we're seeing new things, right? I mean, lending, staking. I mean, what do you consider DeFi? You know, I mean, right now DeFi is a mix of some services that already exist in traditional sector, like lending. I mean, that's the business of a bank, right?
Yes, shadow banking era.
Exactly. But even how do you license a DAOs? That's, for example, super exciting for me. So MICA 2.0 is really something I'm excited about. We're well equipped at the MFSA because we have a sandbox. So we intend to fully use that sandbox. MICA 1.0, we know how to do. We know to authorize, we know to supervise. But I think we can really help with 2.0, seeing how new services could be brought in. And if I recall correctly, there's already a timeline for some reports actually on DeFi. So
I'll be excited to read them.
I believe the Commission is expecting something 1 year after MICA comes in.
Or 1 or 2 years.
Yes, there is something. So they're already thinking of that.
Yes.
And even within the working group, we're using a lot of use cases of DeFi and new things to go after, because this needs to be a future-proof text. We cannot just license centralized exchanges.
No.
Okay, that's good, but that doesn't cover the entire market. So
very technical and challenging. I mean,
but exciting from a policy perspective, because I mean, this is the same journey that was done for centralized exchanges 4 or 5 years ago.
Yes.
Say, hey, how do you regulate such beasts?
But it's good they regulated CeFi first, because most of the risks and the collapses we're seeing are in CeFi. DeFi is sort of dangerous from a security, hacking, bridges perspective, but when it comes to reliability and automation, people are saying, look, DeFi works. The corrupt players are in CeFi.
Yes. Also, it's important to regulate CeFi first, because think of it as a fiat gateway. Yes. If you control the in and out in terms of fiat, you already reduce bad actors, right? Because, okay, a money launderer might want to use crypto, but at some point you need to use a credit card. You need to have access to fiat.
Yes.
So unless
bridges the gap.
Exactly. Unless you plug those two, the in and out, you're never going to be safe, because there's always going to be criminal using it. Then when you have that sorted, you can fix the inside, what's happening, and you're purely crypto to crypto, there's no problem. But you need a foundation. If the access to fiat is compromised, we have an issue: financial stability, contagion risk, all of that. So we need to build on that, and then new services we can regulate. Potentially we realize that code is low and we don't need to regulate those, and that would be exciting as well.
True. Amazing. And that's a really nice way to conclude as well, of the broader what's going on in the industry and projections. So honestly, Camille, thank you so much for the whole conversation. I am 100% sure it's going to be very, very insightful for many market players. I've been speaking to many market participants and conferences, and everyone is sincerely looking for the answers which you have provided throughout the session. So I'm very excited to release to the public. Before I let you go, I'd just like to invite you for a very quick round of I Call Bullshit. I will read out the next paragraph and tell me if you think it's bullshit or not. So earlier this month, Rio de Janeiro unveiled its plan to allow citizens to accept crypto to pay property tax. The same city's pro-crypto mayor has previously stated that he wants crypto to make up of 1% of its treasury reserves. Furthermore, in nearby Argentina, the city of Mendoza began accepting tax payments in a few stablecoins late last August. More recently, the capital of Buenos Aires also signaled it was ready to let citizens pay in taxes. Do you think this statements from Crypto News published last October is true, bullshit, or not bullshit?
I think it could be true. We're seeing a lot of crypto adoption in South America, and fiat is getting a bit scarce.
Yes. Actually, it is true. And I think there's also Zug, Switzerland, which they can pay taxes in. Obviously, it's Crypto Valley. Let's see, could Malta be next?
Yes, it could be. I mean, fiat is definitely scarce, and we're seeing that. Plus, there's the hyperinflation, in certain part of the world where
especially
actually
Argentina.
maybe crypto is less volatile than cash,
Yes,
which is interesting to see.
Definitely, especially Argentina. Okay, great. So, Camille, thank you very, very much for joining us today. As I said, it was a really great discussion. For you, the listener, if you enjoyed this episode, please like and share and also subscribe to our newsletter. So, thank you for listening, and until next time.